A man asked if the portal was still open. The question didn't come from the door. It came from somewhere inside the store, folded into the steady hum of the refrigerators and the faint electrical buzz of the lights. For a moment I thought I'd imagined it. One of those phantom sounds that surface when the night gets too quiet and your brain starts supplying its own company. Then I turned. The man stood near the coffee machine, close enough that the heat lamps above the counter should have warmed him. They hadn't. His coat was damp along the seams, darkened as if moisture had condensed directly out of the air and chosen him as a surface. The smell followed him. Cold stone, wet dust, something old that didn't belong indoors. Like the air itself was remembering something it shouldn't. I was certain I hadn't heard the bell. "Sorry," I said. He lifted his head slowly. His eyes were open, alert, but they didn't react to the light. No squint, no shine. They looked like they were focused on something behind me, beneath me, somewhere I couldn't follow, as if he could see the air between the floor tiles, hear the faint pulse in the walls, feel the vibrations in the concrete. "Is the portal," he said, carefully spacing the words, "still open?" The lights flickered, not off, not on. Just a soft dimming, like the building exhaling. The refrigerators answered with a deeper note, the hum stretching lower until I felt it in my ribs. A distant ventilation fan groaned somewhere above, low enough that it felt like a drumbeat coming from beneath the floor. "We don't have anything like that," I said. The words came out automatically, practiced. "Bathrooms closed. ATMs down." He smiled faintly, as if I'd confirmed something for him. "It doesn't advertise," he said. The floor felt different under my shoes. Not moving, not sinking, just less certain. Like the tiles were remembering pressure instead of holding it, storing footsteps and posture, subtle routines, something older than me. The linoleum felt slightly warmer under my heels, though the air was cold and dry. "You work nights," he said. "Yes, always nights." I hesitated. "Mostly." "That's good," he said. "It needs continuity." I didn't like the way he said it, the way the word continuity seemed to linger in the corners of the store, in the hum and the smell and the thickness of the air. The coffee machine gurgled behind him, though no one had used it in hours. A thin thread of steam curled upward, then vanished, absorbed into the ceiling tiles. Something in the air shifted around it. "You should leave," I said. "If you're not buying anything." He nodded, distracted. His fingers brushed the edge of the counter as he passed, and I felt a cold pressure bloom there, seeping through the laminate. Not a touch, more like a suggestion, a faint imprint left behind in the air and the floor beneath it. "Tell me," he said, stopping near the center aisle. "Do you ever feel like the store is waiting for something?" I didn't answer. He crouched, not fully, just enough to bring his ear closer to the floor. He didn't press it down. He hovered, listening. The hum of the refrigerators wavered, then settled into a rhythm that felt uncomfortably familiar. My heartbeat. "You keep time," he said softly. "That's why it holds." "Holds what?" I asked. He straightened. "The overlap, the pressure point, whatever you want to call the place where habits pile up until they dent something. Patterns that refuse to fade. The quiet, precise moments that mark the edges of what we call reality." The vibration started then, barely perceptible. A low, steady pulse that traveled up through my legs and stopped just short of discomfort. Shelves didn't rattle. Bottles didn't shake. The refrigerators hummed. It was too precise for that. A subtle warmth ran along my spine as if the floor itself had recognized the rhythm in my chest and copied it. The fluorescent lights overhead pulsed faintly in time with the beat. Every breath I took seemed to thrum against the store's architecture. The man closed his eyes, satisfied. "It's still open," he said. "Good. What happens if it closes?" I asked. He opened his eyes. For a moment, something like pity crossed his face. "You'd notice," he said. "But by then it doesn't matter. The pattern would have chosen a new keeper." The lights dimmed again, longer this time, and when they brightened, the air felt heavier, charged. The vibration tightened, sinking more closely with my pulse until it was hard to tell which was leading, whether it was mine or the building's own. A draft curled up my sleeves, whispering along the air ducts, carrying the faint metallic scent of something ancient. "You should have rotated out," he said. "They usually do. Quit. Transfer. Get sick. But you stayed." "I need the hours," I said, though the words felt thin and brittle. He nodded. "That's how it picks." A sound came from beneath the floor. Not loud, not sudden. A slow, structural groan, like a building settling after decades of holding its breath. The vibration surged, then steadied, perfectly aligned with the beat in my chest. I felt it in my teeth, my lungs, the soles of my feet. "You don't open it," the man continued. "You don't close it. You just maintain the pattern." The idea slid into place too easily, a revelation that made the air itself seem weighty, as though the store were aware I had understood. The man stepped toward the door. This time the bell rang when he touched it, clear and sharp. He paused, hand on the handle. "When it starts asking back," he said, "don't answer." "Wait," I said. "What do you mean asking?" He looked at me over his shoulder. "You'll know." The door shut. The sound echoed longer than it should have, then dissolved into the hum. I was alone. The store felt larger now, stretched thin. The vibration slowed, testing different rhythms, then settled back into mine. I pressed my hand against my chest, trying to calm it. The beat refused to change. The tiles beneath my feet seemed to thrum with a patient insistence, as if they remembered every footstep I'd ever taken here. From somewhere below, something responded. Not sound, not movement, just awareness. An answering pressure that felt like attention, like something beneath the floor was measuring me, learning me, cataloging every heartbeat, every pause, every breath. The lights overhead brightened in sequence, aisle by aisle, not flickering but counting. I stood behind the counter, exactly where I always stood. The store held steady. So did I. And somewhere beneath the floor, something learned my rhythm well enough that it didn't need to listen anymore. The store's floor tiles rearranged themselves into a spiral. I had been working the graveyard shift for nearly 3 months, long enough to memorize every hum, every flicker, every imperfection in the linoleum beneath my shoes. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed unevenly, cycling in a slow, disorienting rhythm that made the shadows along the aisles twitch as if alive. The refrigerators hummed, low and insistent, their condensation dripping in tiny, irregular pulses that sounded like a clock no one wanted to read. I was rearranging the snack racks when I noticed it. At first, I thought it was a trick of the dim lighting, a shadow misaligned with the floor tiles. One corner of the linoleum, the square nearest the dairy cooler, shifted slightly, a subtle popping sound underfoot, like a joint settling. I froze. My boots made no sound. Nothing else moved. The corner tile rotated. Not a slip, not a tilt, rotated. Its edge aligned differently with its neighbors. I swallowed, trying to convince myself it was my imagination. Then another tile popped, and another. They moved with a faint scratching sound, soft and deliberate, echoing oddly in the otherwise silent store. The hiss of refrigeration, the faint draft from the vents, the distant highway noise. All seemed to recede, leaving only the low, mechanical whisper of tiles rearranging themselves. I stepped back onto the linoleum, heart hammering. The floor was bending subtly beneath me. Not like liquid, it wasn't flowing, but like something conscious was selecting the order of the squares, nudging them, testing spatial relationships I wasn't meant to notice. I felt the vibration under my boots, the hum resonating through the heel of my foot, climbing my leg, settling behind my sternum. By the time I reached the center aisle, a spiral had begun to form. The tiles, dozens of them, shifted as though pulled by a magnet buried deep beneath the concrete. The pattern was meticulous. A spiral expanding outward, perfectly symmetrical, each square aligning into concentric arcs that seemed impossibly precise. The lines pointed inward, toward a center that felt charged with pressure. My skin tingled, and I realized that the air had changed. It smelled faintly of ozone and dust, sharp and metallic, as though the building itself were breathing. I tried to step around the spiral to keep the path of the aisles clear, but the tiles adjusted underfoot. The spiral widened, curling around the soda fridge, the snack racks, the display near the registers, forcing me to walk along its curve. I could hear faint scratching noises beneath the laminate, tiny grinding sounds like gears spinning in a mechanism hidden beneath the concrete. The tiles vibrated in time with my pulse. Something about the spiral demanded attention. It was more than geometric, more than a curiosity. It felt like a memory sink, a vessel waiting to be filled. When I looked at the spiral from the front counter, the pattern seemed to stretch impossibly far, folding the store's layout inward, compressing space toward its core. The aisles appeared longer than they should have been. The soda shelves leaned slightly, bending toward the spiral's center, and the candy racks along the far wall seemed to inch closer without anyone touching them. I wanted to leave. I wanted to call someone, but the spiral shifted again, subtly, curling tighter under my boots, its inner core always just beyond reach, coaxing me closer. I realized then that it wasn't the tiles moving randomly. It was waiting for me to walk it, to walk the curve. Each step I took aligned with the pattern, drew the spiral tighter, gave it shape and purpose. The lights above flickered faster, in a rhythm that echoed my own heartbeat. Time stretched in uneven loops. I swear I watched the clock jump forward and back in seconds I could feel but not fully register. Products rearranged themselves along the aisles. Bags of chips seemed to shift, turning their faces toward the spiral. The candy display leaned slightly, edges of boxes overlapping in impossible angles. The store itself was aware. It watched. I couldn't stop walking. My feet moved of their own accord, following the spiral's inward curve. The center beckoned, though I couldn't see it fully. It was a point of pressure, like standing in the eye of a storm, only there was no wind, just a weight pressing into my chest. The hum of the refrigerators dropped lower, harmonized with the pulse beneath my feet, a resonance I could feel in my bones. At one point, I caught myself tracing a step with my hand, brushing the linoleum as though feeling for texture, for pattern, for the subtle heat that radiated along the spiral. The tiles seemed warmer closer to the center, almost alive. And then, faintly, I began hearing something else. Faint whispers impossible to localize, like voices speaking beneath the floor. They were syllables without language, reminders without memory. I didn't recognize the sound, but my body reacted before my mind could process it. Fear, yes, but also compulsion. I rounded another curve, heading inward, and realized the spiral's point of focus wasn't on the floor at all. It was me, or maybe it was the space I occupied, the repeated pattern of my shift, the routine I had carved into the building over nights and nights of solitary work. The tiles moved not randomly but to accommodate me, to gather the echoes of my footsteps, my pauses, my habits, feeding them into the center. Pressure point, a lock, something that demanded maintenance. I wanted to break the pattern, to step off, but the tiles subtly nudged me back. The spiral's edges curled, tracing my boots, reshaping the geometry of the store around me, guiding my steps, ensuring compliance. Each rotation I took was a rotation it required, a rotation that I didn't fully control. And the air pressed harder. The ozone was sharper. The weight of the spiral pressed into my spine. Then I saw the center. Not a hole, not a doorway. A single tile, slightly raised, humming softly. It emitted a vibration that aligned perfectly with my heart, my breathing, the rhythm of my steps. I realized with a sudden, sickening clarity that this spiral was not a curiosity, not a trick of the building. It was a mechanism, a ritual, a clock that demanded a keeper. I had unknowingly volunteered. I tried to step back, but the floor subtly shifted again, and I was moving inward, inexorably, drawn by something patient and infinite. I could feel the spiral learning my rhythm, testing me, adjusting itself with each heartbeat I offered. The aisles outside the spiral stretched and bent. Products leaned closer. Lights flickered in sync, until everything in the store existed solely to point toward that central tile. I crouched, trying to steady myself, but the vibration continued. The whispers grew louder, shaping into fragments I almost understood. Repetition, continuity, balance. The spiral demanded maintenance. My presence alone gave it life. Without me, it would collapse or reach outward in ways I did not want to imagine. I stood there, feet aligned along the innermost curve, the center beneath me humming softly, resonating through my bones. The spiral's purpose was clear. It needed a keeper, and I had been chosen. The realization pressed into me harder than the floor beneath my boots, harder than the low hum that vibrated in time with my heartbeat. I understood, too late, that it was not just tiles rearranging themselves. It was the building, alive in a way that had no name, measuring me, cataloging me, bending the physical laws around me to ensure the spiral remained complete. And now it had me. I stayed. I walked. I rotated. I maintained it. The lights above pulsed in time. The air smelled of ozone and dust, heavy and metallic. And somewhere beneath the tiles, the building learned my rhythm so precisely that it no longer had to wait. I was part of the spiral, and it was endless,